you're being so negative about this. If I could pick one city to get trapped in for 24 extra hours, that would be the one. I mean, look at you. You're like out on a patio. There's blue skies. Like it looks great.
Well, this would be
Cheer
great if
up.
I didn't. This would be great if I didn't have to write.
Hello and welcome back to the Dodgers Post. I'm Jack Harris, California Post Dodger beat writer, along with our baseball columnist Dylan Hernandez. Dylan, where are you at today? Because it doesn't look like Dodger camp, which is where we were originally planning to tape this episode. But you got some nice weather behind you.
Yeah, I guess I'm close, relatively closer to where the Dodgers used to have spring training. I'm in Miami Beach, which would ordinarily be great, but yeah, Miami Airport was quite a mess yesterday. A bunch of American flights got canceled, and so I was trying to make it back. For the announcement today, which I guess we were going to talk about first about Yamamoto being the opening day starter, but alas, I did not make it
But
out.
but you wanted to spend an extra night in Miami instead. That
Well, I don't know. Everything was just bad. Yeah, just getting out of that airport, getting my flights rebooked, everything was just such a
you're
nightmare.
You're being
I
so
think,
you're being so negative about this. If I could pick one city to get trapped in for 24 extra hours, that would be the one. I mean, look at you. You're like out on a patio. There's blue skies. Like it looks great.
well, this would be
Cheer
great if
up.
I didn't. This would be great if I didn't have to write. But anyway, let's talk. Enough about me. Nobody cares. Let's talk about Yamamoto.
Yes, Yoshinobu Yamamoto will be the Dodgers opening day starter. Dave Roberts announced that. We're recording here on Monday. It's the second straight year he's the opening day starter. This one will feel a little different, obviously, than last year when they opened in Tokyo. He'll get to do it at Dodger Stadium on the day they raised the banner, and a banner that he really played a pretty big hand in as the World Series MVP last year. And obviously, this is not a surprising decision, but I think it does kind of reinforce the fact that this guy has become the ace of this pitching staff, a staff that has so many other good arms. That the fact that there wasn't even really a question about him getting this nod coming out of the WBC. I mean, what does this say to you just about his importance to the team and the status he has carved out here after 2 years with the Dodgers?
Yeah, you got to give. I think. I mean, I guess where I would start with is just kind of giving the Dodgers credit for getting this thing right. I think some of the other teams that were involved in the bidding of this thing, right, particularly the two New York teams, I think when they saw the final price, probably were like a little bit relieved, at the time, that they didn't, that he wound up kind of not choosing them because of just how much money was involved. And, you kind of go back to the first spring training and kind of all the doubts, frankly, right, that we had about Yamamoto.
First
And
spring training, his first game
yeah,
in
right. And then,
Korea.
right. And that led to him just kind of getting blown up in that first, like you said, right. It was, one inning, 5 runs. And he didn't get out of that. And you're kind of looking at this like, man, can this guy even pitch here? I mean, and very quickly, I think he kind of showed us what he was about, right? The next start that he made, it was back at Dodger Stadium, and he went 5 scoreless at the time. And so you're kind of like, okay, right? This guy kind of has the insides, but it also kind of speaks, I think, to just his ability to kind of adapt and evolve. And, I think even, kind of throughout the course of that first season, right? Our good friend Yu Suzuki, one of his former teammates in Japan, who's now working as a broadcaster, kind of talked about, this still doesn't feel like kind of the Yoshinobu of old yet. He's still kind of figuring it out. And sure enough, that year in 24, right, he had the big win in the game 5 of the division series against the Padres. I think that kind of, right, put him a step forward. And then that led to a great season last year, which kind of ended with him doing stuff, kind of once in a generation stuff in terms of the workload. So, yeah, it really kind of, speaks, I think, to kind of how he, not just kind of how good he is, but how he really defied a lot of, I think, overcame maybe some of the pessimism, frankly, that I think that a lot of us had at the time. And I think he's going to kind of start to challenge maybe some, perceived notions that we have about pitching and what a starting pitcher is supposed to look like. And you're already starting to see a little bit of that, right? I mean, Mookie Betts is out there throwing the javelin now that Yamamoto uses to train. And, I've heard about some other pitchers, with the Dodgers kind of going, seeking some advice from Yada Sensei, Osamu Yada, Yamamoto's longtime trainer. So, yeah, and if you kind of, again, listen to kind of like, the ideas that that Yada and Yamamoto have about kind of where he is, right? They're still expecting more from this. So this could be, maybe step one towards a Cy Young this year.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about what he did last year that I think is exciting for the Dodgers coming into this season is the fact that he seemed to really figure out, I think, at a different kind of level how his stuff plays in the majors during that postseason run last year. I mean, to go out there and throw two complete games, to pitch the way he did, basically outside of that first start of against the Phillies, just over the course of the playoffs, it looked like a guy who, even at times last year, like obviously he got off to that great start in April, and then it kind of tailed off a little bit, right? He started nibbling too much around the zone. He wasn't very efficient. There were a couple months where he was just kind of like an okay pitcher. He had another good stretch in the second half, but I think even going in to the playoffs last year, there were questions about, can this guy take that next step into being like a true ace? And that's what he did in October. And I think that's what's going to be exciting for the Dodgers this year is to see, even with how much he pitched, last October and the fact that he pitched in the WBC, there are the workload and health concerns. But assuming that he stays healthy, I think it's going to be interesting to watch how he takes the lessons that he learned in the playoffs last year and applies them over the course of a full season and see if he can really, challenge somebody like Paul Skeens, maybe be the best pitcher in the National League and try to win a Cy Young. And I think even what we saw at the WBC, I mean, you were there for Japan's loss against Venezuela the other night, even that outing, kind of showed that to me because clearly he didn't have his best stuff early. They had just flown halfway around the globe. But even by the third and fourth inning of that game, it was like, okay, like this guy, even in this kind of start against a really good Venezuela lineup, is kind of figuring things out. Like you see him kind of find his splitter or just using his cutter, even when his command's a little shaky. Like I think he has more ways to navigate MLB quality lineups, to use his mix to get big league hitters out, and now has that coupled with the experience of what he did last year, which makes him, again, the obvious choice for opening day. And I think maybe one of the most interesting guys in baseball to kind of follow this year.
Yeah. Am I okay with the picture here? You're kind of coming in a little glitchy.
You look okay to me. Can you
Okay.
hear me okay?
I can hear you totally fine. I can't. You're like frozen though.
Okay.
Sometimes. So,
This
well, this is yeah. Well, I mean, the marvels of modern technology. We can at least do this. So, who am I? Who am I to complain?
All right.
How does the I mean, I obviously, you look at him. I think right now you look at kind of Tyler Glasnow and kind of figuring, right, okay, at least if he's healthy, he'll be fine. You look at Yamamoto. You look, Otani. You feel pretty good there. Obviously Snell's kind of still working his way back. But what do you feel when you kind of look at the rest of that starting rotation? And are you concerned at all about kind of the depth that has already kind of been eroded, by the kind of setback in a way, I guess, that Gavin Stone experienced?
Yeah, well, the state of the rest of the rotation right now is it's going to be Yamamoto, Glasnow, Otani, as three of the starting five to begin the year, and they're only going to have five at least for the first couple weeks, given all the off days they have. And then there's like four guys battling for the last two spots, and Roki Sasaki, Emmett Sheehan, Justin Wrobleski, and River Ryan. To me, I mean, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. I think, the pitching depth is the one way that this season could go wrong if some of the big guys get hurt. And when you look at this camp, the fact that for those last two rotation spots that you have four guys that haven't really separated themselves. I mean, honestly, of that four, the guy who's looked best this spring is River Ryan. And the only reason that he's not a lock for the opening day rotation right now is because they're going to have some workload concerns with him. He's coming off a Tommy John. He didn't pitch at all last year. I think they're going to have to kind of decide, do we want to burn his bullets, in April and May when maybe we could save him for later in the season when the games are more meaningful. But like we've talked about Roki a lot, he had a better outing in a B game last week against a bunch of White Sox minor leaguers, which on the one hand was good, but on the other, like he just threw a bunch of splitters that they couldn't hit. I don't know how much you can really take out of that. Emmett Sheehan hasn't looked great this spring. His velocity was a little bit down yesterday when he pitched against the Cubs. Justin Wrobleski has been okay, but I think there's still questions about, trying to move him back into a full-time starter role. So it's not an outright concern. I mean, you still have four really talented arms in that whole group, but you do want to see a couple of these guys kind of find it. Because if you do have injuries to Yamamoto or Glasnow or whatever else, like you're going to have to count on some of those guys in much bigger roles. And I think when I look at this spring overall, like that's still the big question I have is if things do go sideways for the rotation at some point, it's one thing to count on Emmett Sheehan and Roki and some of these other guys to be the number 4, number 5 pitcher in your rotation and eat innings over the course of a year. But if they get in a spot where they're down 2 or 3 of their veteran guys that carried them through the playoffs last year, I do kind of wonder how it's going to look with the depth piece of this. And so far this spring, it's kind of raised of those other guys more questions than answers.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of look back at last year, right? I mean, obviously Otani was the MVP, but you kind of like after him, it probably was like Yamamoto. I mean, he was the one guy that kind of stayed in the rotation the whole season, and yeah, he did have like a little right. There was a couple week period there that was a little bit bumpy for him, but he was the guy that they could kind of always kind of go to kind of reset things if things kind of went awry a little bit. So yeah, I do think yeah he go. I mean, then again, right? If any team loses their ace, they're probably going to be in trouble. So I'm not really sure that uh, you know
Yeah,
makes
but but
them that
but
distinct from anybody else.
but I guess the point there would be, the front office come into the season talking about this might be the best collection of arms we've had, not just of the top 3 or 4 guys, but when you look 1 through 8, 9, or 10. And I don't think that that's we've seen that to this point. And for a team that, yeah, every team kind of needs their best pitchers to be healthy. But we're grading the Dodgers on a different curve. And if we're trying to talk about them as one of the great teams of all time, which I think they have the potential to be this year, a couple injuries, and suddenly you might be back in a spot like you were a season ago, where you're in more of a dogfight for the NL West, and you're having to kind of push yourself late in the season. And again, like when you look at the path they had to go through a season ago, if the Padres were just a little bit better, they might not win the division. They still had to play in a best of 3 wild card round. They still had to put themselves on the toughest possible path, or just about the toughest possible path to get to the World Series. And if you're trying to avoid that this year, like this is just the one area right now where I would have a little bit of pause about, okay, are they really just going to be like 110 win team for sure, or are there ways this season could be a little more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of right. I look at Otani and right now, granted, he's not going to be going like total full, complete full bore from the beginning, but you still have him kind of under relatively normal circumstances for an entire season, right? So he can kind of right theoretically, if something were to happen to Yamamoto, he could step in there. I think Glass now, the way he's looked and at least the way he's kind of talked about things, you kind of think like, you know what, even though he's kind of getting out, right? He's and obviously like in his 30s now that you still kind of think like, hey, actually, you know what, the best might still kind of be ahead for him. So I'm not, yeah. I mean, it does still to me feel like multiple things are going to kind of have to go wrong, right? You're going to have to kind of have probably, not just one, but kind of the entire rotation, almost kind of the top of the rotation, just kind of getting decimated offensively, even, right? Some of the things we've kind of talked about some of the older players not being able to bounce back, although it kind of seems like things are trending kind of upwards, at least, whatever you can kind of glean from spring training so far. So I kind of don't see that happening. And then, obviously with Edwin Diaz in the bullpen, you kind of assume that unit's going to be a little more functional than it used to. So I just kind of don't see that like multi-layered kind of collapse that you would have to see for
Come on, come
them to
on.
kind
When
of
since
fall
since
apart.
when are you so positive? You don't even want to go through like the disaster scenario. You have a pretty creative imagination. You can't think of of
It just
the
feels, yeah. Look, like, and I really feel like that's when my work shines at its best, right? But like, it feels. I mean, realistically, that feels like so far at this point that like, um, I. And then it also kind of depends on like the other teams too. I mean, what do we like? Do we like the Giants like pitching
yeah,
situation? I mean, who's
no.
gonna, you know,
Padres are starting Joe Musgrove on the IL. They announced today. I mean, I honestly, that's probably the thing that if you look around the rest of the division, it's hard to imagine, even if some things go wrong for the Dodgers, like who could really keep pace with them in the NL West. Uh, okay, well, if you want to be so positive, then we'll do this. We're gonna go through and pick four for each of us, four standout players from this spring training. Because there have been a lot of them. I mean, we've talked about this being a boring camp. Part of that is because outside of some of these like pitching questions, really most guys on the rest of the roster have looked good. So I'll let you have first pick at this. Who has stood out to you?
I I guess it's not that much of a surprise, right? But Andy Pajes, I think this was going to be kind of a big year for him, just in terms of we've seen guys, right? Maybe not quite this good, but young players that have come up and kind of had good years, but just kind of had right have kind of failed to stick around. And so I think from that standpoint, this was going to kind of be a big year for him. I mean, obviously, regardless of like what how his career unfolds, that catch that he made in Game 7 of the World Series is always going to kind of be a part of this franchise's folklore. But for him personally, this is going to kind of be a good year. So the fact that he's had a good spring, I think is good.
And
You
a
know,
good spring where uh the one message with him is that he's kind of adopted a more mature mindset. Dave Roberts talked about it, Teoscar Hernandez talked about it. It's shown up, he goes in the hitting lab they have here and has been going up against that traject virtual reality pitching machine, and for 30 minutes every day is getting borderline pitches that he's got to try to identify as a ball or a strike, which is kind of his big thing this year, is trying to have a more disciplined approach at the plate and be a more consistent hitter than we saw certainly in the postseason last year.
yeah, and that's kind of the thing, right? You look at the postseason last year; that was kind of the source of the concern, I think, right? The fact that he kind of disappeared there. So I would say him. Um, I guess I'll go with one of the older guys. Let's go with Teoscar Hernandez. I read about that somewhere. Him doing well, and obviously, because I think he was the kind of guy that, and I think I mentioned this before, but right, had they not won the World Series, I kind of would have been in the, you know, they got to kind of blow this team up from the standpoint of, not like get rid of everybody, but what I kind of meant by that was, of that group of Teoscar, Freddie, Mookie, maybe
Yeah.
you had to get rid of two of those guys, and Teoscar definitely would have been in that group, I think, right? I mean, as it was, right, his name was kind of floating around in trade rumors and stuff. So the fact that like he, is in shape and kind of looking good, I think kind of points to some sort of stability here. And this one's kind of interesting because I think this one could kind of go both ways. You could put him in the good or bad category as Josue De Paula. I think we saw with him at the plate. I mean, that's a beautiful swing, right? I mean, this guy can absolutely hit. There's kind of no question about that. I think there are also, questions about his defense, right? I'll say this kind of personally, just kind of talking to him, I really enjoyed it, and given just how conservative and frankly boring a lot of baseball players are, this kid's got a lot of personality. I think if he were to ever break into a Dodgers team, he would immediately become kind of a fan favorite kind of guy. But I'm not sure it's going to happen here necessarily, right? I do think he's going to eventually do some great things in this game somewhere. I'm just not sure it's going to be here. And I guess the disappointment. Do we go with Roki?
Okay.
Roki
Sure. Although
Sasaki?
you only
Yeah.
gave me three standouts.
Oh, you wanted
Good
four?
math. Yeah, four.
Oh, I thought you wanted to go 3-1. Oh, okay. So one more. Um, one more. I don't know. Do we throw again? This is another one that could kind of go both ways. I mean, Gavin Stone. You know, the
I
fact
mean,
that
he
obviously he's hurt is not
before
good.
injury, yeah.
Yeah, before injury, though, the fact that he looked as good as he did kind of tells you. I mean, he was even looking like he could kind of be a guy, right? I mean, because I do think like when you kind of look at those kind of back end of the rotation type of guys, you're thinking, okay, really, just kind of keep us in a game type thing, right? And I do think that Gavin Stone after, I mean, he got kind of the golden sombrero of shoulder surgeries, right? It was everything, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Wasn't he the one that
Labrum,
got the
yeah,
labrum?
labrum, cuff, and capsule.
Yeah. So I mean, and so given kind of that, you didn't know how he was going to come back, and the fact that he pitched as well as he did, obviously the fact that it flared up on him after he made his first Cactus League start isn't like the best of signs, but it kind of shows you that that's like a potential like real bullet there, right? That's a guy that's just not going to be around for like a few years, kind of just to kind of fill in spots in the rotation. He might actually be a guy.
Yeah, and is getting close to firing up his throwing program again. So not a serious injury. Kind of in that River Ryan bucket of saving bullets. Um, all right, I'm gonna give you my four standouts. Then we'll get to the disappointment. You can let it rip on Roki. Tyler Glasnow. I think we've seen the most of him in this camp.
Yep.
Uh, he, for 2 years now with the Dodgers, he's gone through this cycle of trying to make mechanical adjustments and then having something physically feel wrong and then trying to adjust to that and never really just having an extended stretch where he can go out, clear his mind, and compete on the mound and just let his talent take over. I think we saw some of that in the playoffs last year. He said he made some adjustments going into the postseason mechanically. But the other thing is he's clearly found a level of trust with the pitching coaches here. He talked about that a lot. Mark Pryor talked about, it's obviously a guy who has a lot of thoughts about his pitching, who has a lot of questions when they make suggestions, but he's found a comfort level and trust within the organization and with his throw that I do think he's kind of set up to have maybe his best season, the best season of his career. Because I think he's kind of over. I'd be more surprised this year if one of those little nagging things pops up and derails him in the way we've seen it happen the last couple years. Uh, I'll go with River Ryan for my other one, kind of like Stone. He's looked really good. And even going back to the offseason, people around the team were talking about how impressed they were with the way he changed his body coming back from Tommy John, with the way his stuff has played up. Again, I don't know what they're going to do with him for opening day, but he's got like 12 strikeouts and 9 innings this spring. He's dialed in his command. His velocity is up, and he's somebody that when you do look at that depth group of pitching, honestly, he's probably the one guy, even including like Roki and Sheehan, who, at least from a stuff perspective, from what we've seen so far, would give me some confidence that, okay, if there's a stretch of the season where he's got to make 10 or 15 starts, you probably feel good about at least the talent he's going to bring to the mound. Who else do we want to pick here? Santiago Espinal. How about him? He's snuck his way onto the opening day roster, has had a huge spring. We'll see how long he sticks around, but he's at least kind of done something every day he's been out there. And, it's my fifth year covering this team. I can't recall a lot of guys who went from like minor league signings at the start of camp to carving out a role on the opening day roster. It's a hard thing to do. So that part's been impressive. And then we'll finish with how about Tanner Scott? He has not given up an earned run in the Cactus League. He's done a better job of staying away from the middle of the plate. He's kind of like Tyler Glasnow, another guy that I think is finding a greater level of comfort and trust in the organization. Even Oral Hershiser helped him with the conversation they had at the start of spring. And for somebody that's going to be really important in the bullpen puzzle, I think, when I look at that group, like between him and Blake Trinan, they're gonna need those guys to just be better, even with Edwin Diaz, in the closer role. They're gonna need some other guys to help set him up. And I think I would feel good if I'm the Dodgers about for how badly last year went, for seeing at least some of the strides that he's made so far in this spring. All right, you wanna explain why Roki's still your disappointment, even after electric B game outing last week?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to go with Roki. just
Oh,
because I
wow.
still think this is good. Yeah, I'm actually kind of starting to turn on this. I still, well, I mean, I've always thought this is gonna. I don't know. I'm always kind of positive about Roki. I think it's gonna work out in the end. So I guess I'm gonna go with Hyeseong Kim.
Okay.
Um, because
It
just the
started as a
way
good
it's
camp. It
it's
started
well,
as a
that's what
good
I
camp
meant,
for
right?
him.
And that's what I mean, right? Because I really liked, when he right the speed that he brings on the base is just really kind of gives him a completely different, look. And I really liked, when he first came up last year in the middle of the season, and he's at the bottom of the order, and he was getting on base at least at the beginning, right? And then you have Otani kind of coming up and driving them in, and it really just kind of changed them. And so, from the standpoint, I guess, of like the way it started and the improved power that he showed, right, and like the bat looked better. I was kind of thinking like, man, this has like a potential to really kind of like take what already looks like it could be again like kind of a historic type of lineup and even juice up the bottom of it. And now we're not so sure now, right? And so, where does that kind of put him? Um, you know, uh, so yeah, I guess I would say him just because of the loss. I guess if you had asked me a couple weeks ago where I thought what this team would look, where he would be, and what this team would look like, and just kind of to where we are right now, all of a sudden, after him kind of struggling a bit in the WBC, I think now you're kind of wondering, okay, what is this going to be? And then also too, right? I mean, the fact that he struggled in the WBC, I don't kind of take that as like, okay, well, he's just kind of struggling in exhibition game. And yes, okay, it is early in the year. Obviously, pitchers, I'm guessing, kind of have more of the advantage at this time. But the fact that, this is for other countries, this is like the World Series, right? And, I think there's been a kind of a lot of discussion about this, about how much this means, how much more this means to players in other countries. And the fact that, he, at least at this point, kind of didn't, kind of rise to the occasion. Uh, while I don't necessarily think it says anything, in particular about, where his future, right, what his future might be, I do think the fact that it kind of didn't happen also, I think you kind of have to maybe temper your expectations like a little bit in terms of, okay, right, he's still relevant, he's a young player, he kind of hasn't been through the ringer all that much, and just kind of what is that going to mean when he's going to have to play theoretically a bigger role for the Dodgers.
Yeah, and the weird thing, or I think that the disappointing part for him, because I think that's a good call, is that he was making, like, especially with the swing, he had made a lot of progress over the offseason. He had spent time in LA with the Dodgers hitting coaches, getting these, it was kind of a ground up reconstruction of his swing when he came over from Korea last year. And they finally felt like, okay, they were tapping into what they envisioned when he originally signed. And the fact that he leaves camp for a couple weeks, he goes to the WBC and not only struggles, but the part that was a little alarming to me when he returned yesterday was him talking about, yeah, we looked at video from before I left to after, and I had gotten some bad habits in my lower body and my bat path. Dave Roberts talked about he just kind of looks out of sync since he's come back. That's the thing that I think is a little disheartening, that he's gone for a couple weeks and suddenly maybe not starting back at step one with his swing rebuild, but that some of those changes that they made over the winter and early in camp didn't stick. And kind of raises a question now, like, what do you do? Because they still need somebody to fill out the opening day roster. Do you put him on the team to begin the year, even when at bats might be kind of limited? Do you now maybe think about starting him in AAA for a second consecutive year so he can get some more regular playing time, and then keeping Alex Freeland or maybe one of the other minor league guys on the roster to fill out at bats? So it kind of puts him in a tricky spot when it comes to balancing the needs right now. And they could really use his glove and his defense and his left-handed bat as part of a second base platoon to begin the year. But I also got to think about his development and trying to make sure that he does become a more consistent and trustworthy hitter long term. It looked like at the start of spring that was going to be an easy plug and play option, and now, they got to kind of figure out that last position player roster spot over these final days, which was unexpected. Um, who do I want to go with for my disappointment? I don't want to like pile it on Ryan Ward, who's had a tough, someone who was added to the 40 man at the start of the offseason, looked like, he was going to get a chance to compete for some real playing time in the big leagues after winning MVP in the Pacific Coast League last year. But that's the one guy who I think had some opportunities to really, even if it wasn't going to be as big of a role because they signed Kyle Tucker, like this right now would have been a good example. Maybe that's somebody, if Hyeseong Kim and Alex Freeland are struggling, he could have pushed he could be kind of a left-handed bat to be in the equation, and he just wasn't very good. He was optioned to AAA camp. So yeah, sorry for a guy who a lot of Dodger fans were kind of wondering, why isn't he coming up last year? Why isn't he playing? Why is Michael Conforto still around? Uh, that's one guy that I think is, again, in a camp with kind of few disappointing players, we haven't seen a lot out of.
Yeah,
So
I
it's a
agree with that one. Because it's also it feels like, I
it
mean,
feels kind of mean though. Yeah,
well,
it's
but I hate to say this, but like, right, kind of in this case, I guess the computer won. You know, because I was wondering about that, right? Like, why isn't this guy getting a chance? And he's a guy that probably, right. I mean, he's on the shorter side. He doesn't have like kind of the prototypical build, but on top of that too, it's about kind of the swing mechanics, right, and the bat path and all these kind of things that they track. And you were kind of right. I mean, because this guy's like putting up numbers down there, and you're kind of hoping, right? I don't know, right? The romantic side of you is kind of looking at this, thinking, okay, maybe this is a guy that can kind of like, defy the math and kind of the current like science of it, and just kind of find a way to kind of get it done. And he, unfortunately, at least here, wasn't able to. My guess again, he's going to probably be. One thing I do think we have to kind of acknowledge is that it's really tough for a young player, I think, to break into this Dodgers team, right? Because the standard is now you're competing every year, and you can't. It's one thing. Okay, we're gonna okay, well, we got one spot that we need to plug. Okay, we're gonna throw a young guy in there. It's kind of a whole different thing if it's like, okay, well, we got that plug-in guy, but we're actually gonna like count on this other young guy to kind of produce. The Dodgers kind of really don't have that luxury, right? I mean, the fact, and so that I think that there are going to be a lot of players that we're going to see. We've seen some already, right, that kind of go on somewhere else and have decent careers. But the Dodgers just kind of don't have the luxury of just kind of waiting around 2 to 3 years for a guy to kind of become the guy he's supposed to become, because, they are trying to win right now. And if they don't, if, you come up and you're not, again, it's kind of one thing if you're that one guy that's just kind of getting, in there to kind of plug a hole. But otherwise, the team's going to kind of go out and spend money, right? I mean, this is the thing is like, Ryan Ward is probably penciled into that spot if they don't get Kyle Tucker. But that's the thing, right? The Dodgers ultimately did have the money to go sign a Kyle Tucker, spend $240 million. That's not an opportunity that everybody had. So, again, I expect at some point, most likely Ward is going to, he's getting older now, right? He's 28 now. My guess is he's going to be one of those guys that's going to get moved at the trade deadline. And I think that there are going to be a lot of other teams that are going to be like, what, I like the numbers, I like the production there. I think, yeah, he's an interesting looking hitter. I think we could do something with that.
all right. We'll end here. Speaking of money, do you have a take for me on the Dodgers' newest sponsor, Uniqlo, getting the naming rights to the playing surface at Dodger Stadium, Uniqlo Field at Dodger Stadium? You okay with this? This got a big reaction yesterday, a much bigger one than I was anticipating.
I guess I'm not too upset about it because, like, I mean, of all the things, right? Of all the possible sponsors, like, I don't know, like, I kind of like Uniqlo. My wife shops at Uniqlo. My kids like Uniqlo. Relatively speaking, like their prices aren't like ridiculous. Um, you know, um, so I mean, it's better than like some hedge fund or some private equity firm sponsor. If it were
Oh,
like
what?
Guggenheim,
Like
right?
Guggenheim?
Yeah, like Guggenheim, right? If it was like Guggenheim Field, like that would feel really gross. Um, you know, Especially again, like I mean, I don't want to get into like a whole economic slash political discussion about what's going on right now, but I mean, you know, there are certain segments
Oh,
of
you
our
don't?
economy that I there's certain segments of society that I feel are responsible for me being here right now, because people in air traffic control couldn't show up, uh, right? So, where our society, doesn't seem to be
You're right.
functioning even at a basic level anymore.
You're the
So,
victim, Dylan. You are the victim. Oh, I'm stuck in Miami for a whole extra day. Stupid government.
so right, and there's certain people that kind of buy out, right? I mean, everybody's owned by everybody at this point, whatever. But so relatively speaking, yeah, it's better than like a bank, right, slapping their name on the field. So given the fact that it's Uniqlo, I'm not as now. Granted, I will say this: I don't know much about Uniqlo. You know, I have no idea if they have sweatshops, and in forsaken parts of the world. So apologize if that is the case. But all things considered, I'm not that outraged about it. How about you? Are you taken aback by this?
Uh, no. I mean, come on. Well, it's the Dodgers. It's the Otani era Dodgers. You think they're going to pass up on any? I think fans should honestly be somewhat relieved that it's not Uniqlo Stadium now. And while I understand people that kind of don't like this branding because it's similar to like what USC did with the Coliseum, right? Like United
Correct.
Airlines Field at the Coliseum. Um, you know, it's going to help them sign more players. Uh, like honestly, we wrote about how in Otani's like first year, like revenues went up $200 million for the team compared to the year
Yeah.
before, and the first $1 billion revenue team. And I was honestly kind of thinking, like, okay, well, how do they keep growing that number? And this is how. I will say, Uniqlo, when we were in Japan last year, Uniqlo's good. What's better is it's like their version of Nordstrom Rack. It's called GU.
Hmm.
Great place because Uniqlo's a little pricey for like some pretty for like a white t-shirt. It might be like $60, but that was maybe one of my favorite stores from a value option standpoint I've ever been to. You know me, big fashion guy.
Well, you know what it's kind of funny, right? Because I was here at the WBC, and you look at like the advertising around the stadium, and it's all like Japanese companies, right? I mean, you
Oi
talk about
Oi
you,
Ocha at
yeah,
the post game press conference.
you talk about, I mean, they must be devastated that Japan went out in the quarterfinals, right? I mean, bad gambles on behind of everybody, right? Netflix bought the exclusive broadcasting rights for the games in Japan, right, for the entire tournament. You can't watch it at all. And that's got to be that wasn't good. On the bright side, I guess this is a chance for Itoen, the Oyocha parent company, to sell tea in Venezuela, I guess. but but yeah, so these are kind of gambles too that But I think it's like you said though, right? These are investments in a way that's going to kind of feed into kind of more stuff, right? Uniqlo by paying whatever they are, the Dodgers are going to probably help strengthen the Dodgers down the road. And the better that they are, obviously, the more eyeballs it will bring to Uniqlo Field, and theoretically lead to more people going to Uniqlo. Um, so
Are you gonna call it Uniqlo Field at Dodger Stadium in your columns?
yeah, probably not. Because it's funny, right? Years ago, when I was working at the paper across town, the Dodgers spring training facility. So this is kind of interesting, right? It's in actually Phoenix. The city of Glendale bought a parcel of land in the city of Phoenix, and most people dateline right when they write from there, right? And at the beginning we have like the city where we're in, datelined at Glendale, and that's what the city of Glendale wanted. Now, if I go to like say your place, I wouldn't like dateline at Harris, right? So to me, it was Phoenix, and so what was originally just Camelback Ranch then evolved into Camelback Ranch Glendale because the people of Glendale wanted
Because of you?
the city's name in there, and then I refused to give them that. It's just Camelback Ranch. So no, I don't think it's going to be Uniqlo Field,
Okay.
unless unless I can find a way to turn it into a joke of some kind.
Yeah. I have plenty of confidence in you to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't think because Otani, right? He's a boss guy.
That is funny.
Yamamoto's Yeah, and Yamamoto's taste in clothes seems to be a little bit more expensive.
Yes, it does. So,
I'm not sure about Roki. Roki's kind of a basic, right? I could see Roki maybe as a
mm,
Uniqlo guy. I mean,
maybe.
if he's smart, yeah, that's what he should do, right? Is could go decked out in Uniqlo, and
All right. Well,
they
first
could do Bailado Roki in
for
for a Uniqlo commercial in
for
Japan.
for someone who didn't want to give Glendale free advertising your Dateline, I think we've just given Uniqlo like 20 minutes of free advertising here. So, and any other clothing sponsors want to come sponsor Dodgers Post, have at it. But yeah, until then, yeah, their plan's already working. All right. Uh, well, Dylan, your stream held up well enough during this. I'm sure people are going to love your glitchy face on their computer screens this week, but maybe that's better than getting your clear face for some of our viewers. So,
Or it
yeah,
could just be that my face just looks glitchy.
well, that too. Yeah.
That's just my face. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you
All
get
right.
back from Miami safely. I'm finally leaving Phoenix at the end of this week, and hey, maybe we'll be able to record together in person next week, leading up to opening day. We'll see.
Yeah.
But until then, I'll see you later. Thank you all for watching.